All right. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce our final virtual speaker for the 2023 Festival of Ideas. And this person's work is really close to my heart because I've been a huge fan of Rabbitbox for a really long time, and we'll talk about that later. But Dr. Rhodes is an associate professor of journalism and international communication in the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communications here at the University of Georgia. Dr. Rhodes's research focuses on the role media plays in society, and she's researched those roles in forming a more democratic society, in improving management philosophies for media owners, and in changing societal norms. Dr. Rhodes is incredibly invested in her students. She's conducted study abroad programs to Haiti, Trinidad, Italy, London, and Tanzania. And from the capstone course taught in these programs, Dr. Rhodes has launched 40 new magazines, several of which have been continued through various partnerships, including Atlanta Parent Distributing Connect, the American Business Media in New York Distributing Press, and the Vice President of Service and Outreach Funding 12, a magazine for teens at risk of dropping out of high school. Her current book project is Peace Through Media, which conceptualizes how to teach students to cover conflicts. Dr. Rhodes also is a former full-time freelance writer in the Southeast and worked with many major clients, including Coca-Cola, C&S Bank, the Fortune Group, and Cox Communications, among several others. She has published articles in many regional publications, such as Atlanta Business Chronicle and Business Atlanta, and is a former editor of Creative Loafing, an alternative newspaper in Atlanta. Dr. Rhodes also has filled in as news director at the Trinidad Guardian in Port-Spain, Trinidad. Dr. Rhodes has received several awards, unsurprisingly, for her work, including the 2006 Journalism Teacher of the Year Award and the Roland Page Graduate Teacher of the Year Award, and the first annual University of Georgia Diversity Award for exemplary efforts toward advancing UGA's mission of diversity and academic excellence in 2004, which is really, really an incredible honor. And like I said, it's actually also an honor for us to host Dr. Rhodes. And so Dr. Rhodes is also the director of Rabbitbox, which is a storytelling project here in Athens, Georgia. And I remember when it started in 2012 by Marcy White, and I actually spoke at one, I think in 2013. And I just was so happy. It's very much like The Moth, like NPR's The Moth. And storytelling and narrative is kind of essential to our humanity in this very deep, ancient way. So to bring it into a contemporary realm, but with the kind of timeless style that is storytelling is really an incredible thing to host in a community. So it's not something that's present everywhere, and to be able to witness it, I think can be life-changing for people. People connect with ideas that they may never have understood that other people also shared, or just something that they'd never even thought of before. So the power of these events is definitely, does not go unnoticed. So we have a presentation that has been pre-recorded, but Dr. Rhodes is here also to answer live questions at the end of the presentation. So we'll go ahead and first watch the presentation that Dr. Rhodes made for us, and then afterwards we'll do a Q&A. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. I am very excited to introduce you to Rabbits Out of the Box Build Community. I'm Dr. Lyra Rhodes, and I'm the Executive Director of Rabbitbox Stories. Rabbitbox statistics show that it's been around 11 years, 90 shows, 746 stories, 18 collaborations with community organizations, and 11 story workshops, 5 radio shows. We're like the ever ready little rabbit that we just keep on running and running and running and running. Rabbit Box storytelling is creating community one story at a time. Who are the rabbits and how do we get them out of the box? My presentation will explain how a story creates community, why we should care about stories, how to create these stories, and how Rabbit Box builds communities through storytelling. So how does a story create community? Well, stories express how and why life changes. Life is in a balance, and then something happens, and life is out of balance. You're teetering on a steel post, ready to fall into the void. When an effort is made to restore balance, reality happens, and storytellers have to dig deeper, work with scarce resources, make difficult decisions, take action despite risk, all because we want to discover the truth. Stories offer examples of life changes. This is a story of a man who decided that he would not take work home, nor would he work on the weekends. And he would only work in the office from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. At first, everybody still emailed him 24/7, but then they figured out that when he got in on Monday, he was driven to get the job done and get it done right the first time. So it was a win-win for him. What he figured was, my children and partner have my undivided attention. I sleep so much better, and I feel more energetic at work. No one will remember you if you die for your work. They will remember you as a dad, friend, partner, and son. A story about life changes being positive for family and health. What's not to like about that? Stories are universal. They can bridge cultural, linguistic, and age-related divides. This particular company had a multi-generational staff, and they were to build a 3D printer in aluminum and steel. How did they do that? Well, they worked together. There were Gen X faculty, there were millennial graduate students, and there were boomer researchers. And one of the millennials knew that they needed a part, so he was going to order it on Amazon. But one of the boomers said, we have spare parts here. I can put together something that'll work. And they did it in less time than even Amazon could send it to them. So together, they created a 3D print in aluminum and steel at a much lower cost than had been possible by working together with different age-related divides. Stories are how we remember. In this particular nursing home, the residents have complained to management that they didn't think the employees really cared about them. They did only what was necessary to do. So the management came to the employees and said, tell us what you know about your residents. Well, the employees made lists, Mrs. Davis, Mrs. Florenstein, Mrs. whoever, but that's all they could do, plus their ages. They had to go back to the charts and look at the charts to see something about these people. So then the management said, well, make a story. Talk to them enough so that you can create a story. So they did. And what they came up with was Mrs. Jackson and Mrs. Davis have been friends for 40 years. They live in Green Hill Road in Washington. Their favorite pastimes are going for walks and gardening. Mrs. Davies has a large garden, And in it, they grow strawberries, carrots, peas, tomatoes, and melons. Mrs. Jackson and Mrs. Davies make jams and preserves with their harvest. The employees began taking a different attitude and caring for the people in the nursing home. And the residents began believing that the employees generally cared for them. Stories share the desire to discover a core need for humans. We ask, what is keeping me from achieving desire? Forces within, doubt, fear, confusion, personal conflicts, social conflicts, physical conflicts, forces of nature. How would I act to achieve my desire? So, an example of that, to fulfill my desire to be with people during the pandemic. I live alone and I was in this house all by myself. How could I feel that desire? Well, I created 5 o'clock Zoom meetings with various people in the neighborhood contributing their expertise. We have a very close-knit neighborhood. We have chili cook-offs and spring breakfasts, and we have a book club and a men's auxiliary. So I knew a lot about the people who lived in my neighborhood. In my neighborhood, we had a neighbor who used artist therapy. There was a neighbor who gave a guitar concert, a grandmother homeschooling so parents could work, master gardeners who taught us how we could grow things under our oak trees. A bird watcher in the neighborhood told us about the birds who actually lived in our neighborhood. One neighbor ran 17 miles a day as a way of controlling her need for getting out and being in nature. Another neighbor worked with Vidalia onions. And then a math expert explained how a ship exploded in the Mediterranean. Stories are used as a means by which to precipitate psychological and social change in society. They inspire us, help us imagine perspectives that differ from ours. Such as this story, a Stolo story from the British Columbia, where the Great Spirit traveled the land and talked to the chiefs and told the chiefs that they need to teach all their people how to write their language. But these chiefs didn't. And so these chiefs were heaped into a pile and turned to stone. They wouldn't learn how to write, and they lost that knowledge. Normally, these stories have multiple meanings. In this case, the meaning is that the Stolo people had the responsibility to pass on their language, knowledge, and traditions. Otherwise, without a story to share, there wouldn't be any Stolo people left. This story shows the metaphorical justice system of the Stolo people, their spirituality, and the goodness of humanity, and the continuity of life in a healthy, natural landscape. Another story is from Liberia. And in this story, there was a drought and food was in short supply. And a possum found a palm seed and was scurrying off to his hole to have the palm seed. And he was holding it very tight. And the palm seed asked him to lay him down for a minute because he needed to rest. And the possum refused. And a hunter came along and shot at the possum, and the possum dropped the palm seed and ran into his hole. In the meantime, the palm seed developed and grew into a big plant. And the hunter came back and made a trap. And when the trap was finished, the possum came out and was caught in the trap. And the possum said, please, please let him out. And the hunter says, no. And he killed the possum. And at the feast, eating the possum, he told the people that the possum was one that needed to learn Never abuse a man who is in your power. Fortune may someday reverse conditions. So the cultural norms of Liberia indicated that their ethics was strong. Stories can be shared and help to interpret experiences in human life as we just sit around a room and talk and share what happened during the day. Types of shared experiences in storytelling goes all over, and I'm sure that if you read these 12 suggestions, there is at least one or two, or maybe all of them, that you have endured in your life, and you could tell a story. And this is the beginning of how we share experiences. A shared experience I have is when I was robbed. I was in Miami. I was going to interview a Haitian editor, and I checked where I was leaving from and where I was arriving at, but I didn't check the passage in between. And in that passage in between was the worst drug corner in Miami. And as I was stopped at a stop sign watching for traffic, someone came up, bashed my head against the backrest, and stole my purse out of the seat. When I canceled the interview with the editor, she said, well, we'll just do it on the phone. And I said, no, no, no. I'd flown down here because I really needed to talk with you and put it in my dissertation. So she agreed to come to my hotel. She came. And in that walk from the lobby to my hotel room, she shared a story with me. She too had been robbed. She was living in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and her house was robbed. She got a phone call from the police that said if she would come, they found some things and she could identify them, she could take them home. So she went to the police station, and when she arrived, they arrested her, put her on a plane, and exiled her from Haiti. That was in 1986 when Duvalier shipped out 286 journalists that he feared was disrupting his life and dictatorship. Had I not been robbed, she may never have thought to tell me that story, and I may never have asked, and it was a great story. Stories can help us heal and work through challenges together, united as community. Memoir writing has become part of that healing process. With Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and then Kim Stafford with the book on 100 Tricks Every Boy Can Do about depression. So stories can help us heal. So how do we create stories to build communities? Pixar calls it the story spine structure. Once upon a time, because of that, and because of that, then this happened, and there was no point of return. So ever since then, the moral of the story is this. And this is how they describe it.
Hey guys, welcome. Today I'm going to talk about story structure and specifically the Pixar story spine. Now, the story spine was kind of pioneered by the Pixar company, and it's a way to distill a story into its most basic form so that you can build upon it and so that every scene pushes the plot forward. What it is essentially is it's consolidating the story into a wireframe, essentially. If you're an artist, a gesture, if you're a writer, an outline. And from that outline, the storyteller builds upon the story and puts details into the story. But because he has a structure, he's able to push the plot in the correct direction. Okay, so this is a story spine. It's made up of 6 prompts and it starts off with once upon a time, every day, one day, because of that, until finally. Now, this is kind of the format you want to be able to fit your story into in order to consolidate it and add detail and scenes to expand it. We're going to go through a couple of case studies just to show you how it's put into practice. The first case study is going to be Up. Let's get going. Once upon a time, there was a couple who loved adventure and exploration. Every day, they would save money to go on their own adventure. One day, the woman got sick and passed away. Because of that, the man threw caution to the wind and escaped from his life and went on a long awaited adventure. Because of that, he mistakenly took a young Boy Scout with him. Because of that, the man was forced to make concessions to the little boy and lengthen his trip. Because of that, he had to choose between his long awaited adventure and the scout that he took with him, until finally he realized that the ultimate adventure comes from caring for those you love.
So the story spine structure is the method that Rabbitbox uses. We use themes. Themes are what the story is about, the universal message the story communicates. And in this illustration, we can look at this theme two ways. Is it about falling stars or is it about rising stars? We have a star, we have angels. It could be either way. And our themes are that way. You can find a way to tell your story within the theme. Examples of themes used in literature might help you think of how a theme works. Great Expectations was coming of age. Pacino was about family. The Bluest Eye was about beauty. And Fiddler on the Roof, of course, change versus tradition. And Remarkably Bright Creatures about loyalty. And stories are either fairy tales or legends. Fairy tales are once upon a time, obviously not true, not set time or place, with little emotion. Legends are true and can be emotional. How Rabbitbox builds community through storytelling is have a person tell the story. Often a person has to tell the story of an experience before realizing its value. We look for a shared community. And I'll give you an example. Beach sunbathing. There's no sense of a shared community here. People are out on the beach and there are a lot of people, but they're not really together. And then there's a beach playing volleyball. The desire is to fulfill your own needs, not necessarily to have a shared experience with others. You like playing volleyball. But the beach cleanup can be a shared experience, even though each person may go out in different areas of the beach and clean up, their overall result is that they helped clean up the beach together. It was a shared experience. Rabbitbox believes in listening. We offer a safe place to share stories. Diversity in our storytellers increases diversity in our audience. At the end of every show, we have a group photo of all the storytellers and the MC for the night. So there you can see the mixed people that we have, the variety of people, the expertise. It was a fun night. The importance of listening is something that we've worked towards at Rabbitbox. Listeners are able to imagine new perspectives when they hear a story, can create lasting personal connections, can promote innovative problem solving, foster a shared understanding regarding future ambitions, and can activate knowledge and imagine new possibilities. Listening can build trust, cultivate norms, transfer knowledge. Voices want to be heard, to be accepted. Here is a letter from a storyteller that we had with our Victims of Crime show. I told my story at the Victims of Crime event held with the Athens District Attorney's Office. Thank you for providing a safe place for me to finally share my story and to share how I've managed to move forward with my life. Excuse me. How Rabbit Box tells stories. Stories are 8 minutes long, must be true, legend, must be yours, told with no notes, has the beginning, middle, and end. The story spine, and incorporates the theme for that show. Some of the recent themes we've had include these. We just did the duets and the mystifying. The awkward show is in April, and May is gone but not forgotten. Rabbit Box building community one story at a time celebrated 10 years in May 2022. Survived a 2-year pandemic, grew audience by 75% in 1 year, increased newsletter subscriptions by 50%, increased social media and website views by 120%. Rabbit Box is the fourth Tuesday of the month. Performance season is September through May, but no December. Every community has stories to share. Share your story. The rabbits are out of the box.
Okay. I think that's kind of the end of the video there, right, Lyra? Let's see if we can do
Yeah.
it side by side. Okay. Okay, so one question I have, and folks, please feel free to engage in the chat window and I can read your questions out loud, or if you want to raise your hand, I can help with that as well. One question that I have is, how do you think that the oral tradition of storytelling works differently than written form? Because so many of us actually are, writing more than ever because of social media and text messaging and emailing. I mean, like sometimes I sit and think about how much written communication I do in a day, and it's significantly more than it was 15 years ago. But there's something very specific about the oral tradition that I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Yes, good. Thank you for asking that question, because we really think the oral tradition needs to be nurtured. I've reached out to writers to be a part of Rabbit Box, and many of them refuse because they don't have the confidence to stand. I mean, we have anywhere from 150 to 175 people. So to stand up and tell a story, a true story, your story in front of an audience takes an enormous amount of courage, of confidence. And we love new storytellers. In fact, Gary Nason he's a good friend, and he'd never told a story in front of an audience. He was very, very shy about doing it. And he told a story in the last Rabbit Box, and he now wants to tell another story. He got over his fear. He's comfortable. He feels like he's got stories to share. It goes back centuries. We began with oral traditions, and we remember, at least I remember, sitting around the dining room table listening to my elders share stories, or you're on a road trip and you start asking parents and guardians what their stories are, and it just makes time fly.
It's interesting that I'm realizing that it kind of calls a certain skill of imagination in real time. You can't really go back and reread a sentence. Obviously, you could ask someone to repeat something, but it's not like you could say, okay, start from the beginning again. Like, especially in a group situation, you have to be paying attention in real time with the information. So that's a really different way of using your imagination than if you are reading a book or looking at a website or even contemplating just a general idea, because there's something about the temporal component that you have to be going along with, like you have to be immersed in it. So okay, wait, where did Bonnie go? Bonnie, do you want to unmute and ask your question? I saw your hand was raised.
She may not have sound.
Let me see.
So and you brought something up I want to emphasize. I said sometimes people have to tell their stories before they feel that they have a story to tell. And that's the importance of that particular slide of sharing a story with friends or with your family in the living room, talking out a story. And then you say, well, that's a sharing experience.
Yeah, it is. It's sharing. Exactly. Yeah, instead of just maybe thinking about it in your mind and not, you never bounce it off of anybody. And yeah, you're right. Exactly. It's almost like, is it a story unless there's someone who witnesses it?
Right.
Okay. So Bonnie, I'm going to tell you, if you can, type your question in the chat window, Bonnie. But in the meantime, Anthony asked, how do you think the emergence of different mediums have changed how we tell stories? Oral, written in books, or social media, drawings and comics? I didn't even think of that one. Images, video, and combinations of each.
That's a very complex question to answer, because every medium has a different kind of way of telling a story. We teach multi-platform storytelling in journalism now because there are different ways in which you can use social media and other mediums to tell your story. And I give you an example. In order to use Twitter to tell a story, I suggest that you tell the followers you have that something is going to happen at a particular date. Use that as a quick thing, maybe give them a little clue on it. And then on Instagram, show a picture of what might be happening. And then when you get to the actual story, you've got people following you on several pieces of social media where you can then tell the story in a deeper format. And there's and every story is different. It's very, an 8-minute story is very different from a 10,000 word New Yorker story. With in-depth and color and interviews. A book is a very different way, but each of them, I mean, even when you look at each of those, there are little stories in all of it that build. That if you write a 10,000 word piece for the New Yorker, your interviews, the little stories, how you build on the theme and the idea that you're developing, or even in a book, the little stories that move the character, move the plot, move the whole thing. So these little stories, these 8-minute stories, can really grow into any number of the mediums that you you look for. We're more, and I want to address the visual part of it with the drawings and the comics, the images, the video. All of these things can pull in folks to make a stronger emphasis in the ideas that you're trying to get across. And I think they should all be used. And again, to further the story. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect answer. I'll read Bonnie's question here. I apologize if I have posted this twice, but you didn't, Bonnie, so don't worry. Do you have any sense that the diverse storytellers have helped people in the community understand each other better?
Yes, I do. Particularly with some of the stories on the crime victims, particularly, I think we miss how the person who has been a victim of a crime, how long that struggle takes to get healthy. I think we've missed that. And when we hear them talk about it, then we get the sense of, oh my God, that really took them years to get over that event or to move on or to find a healthy way to talk about being victimized. So I think that had an awareness. I think our stories on gender and trans have been incredibly important for understanding what we might not be going through, but what other people are going through. And then how we as a society, when we're voting on these things or we're talking about them in the legislatures, we have a more informed sense of, here's a real person that I know, I heard their story, and I believed their story. So I think those ways are incredibly important. Race is another issue that we have seen play out in our storytelling, where after the stories have been shared, people hug each other, people congratulate them, and it doesn't matter who you are. The story shared the experience, and so race and gender and trans and everything else just doesn't matter anymore.
You know, that reminds me of that idea of when people have someone in their family experiencing XYZ, they understand it better, right? So it's almost like these storytelling sessions, as you had referenced earlier, you know, people sitting around the table telling stories. It's like this larger table, and it feels like you're part of the family when you're in the session. I haven't attended one in a long time, but the ones I used to go to, you know, were held downtown at whatever that place that's next to the Graduate Hotel is. I don't know.
Yeah.
At the Foundry, yeah. And I'm not sure if they're still hosted there, but and the one that I spoke at was in Sandy Creek. It was a one about, you know, being in nature and kind of like experiences in the natural world. And it just felt like you know, you were spending time with, like, the practice of it was spending time with family and having your turn to speak, and sort of this, there's an instant I guess like, the power dynamics don't really exist the same way because it's everyone gets their turn. Like, that you're going to get to tell your story when you are an identified storyteller, so you don't have to stress or strain about it, and that everyone's listening, so that's a really powerful. I mean, it's really like how many situations do we find ourselves in where that's the case? It's not actually that common. Even you think like some people who do their classrooms like that, maybe there, but it's not very common in our world often. So okay, Leah Samuelson says, I like your distinction between beach volleyball and beach cleanup. I often think about what we can generate for ourselves with collaborative arts events that we don't get when we compete with one another. But I don't want to argue with sports or compete with sports. Can you say more about the unique offering of shared experiences?
Yes. When we share an experience, for example, I shared the experience of being robbed in Miami. I've traveled all over the world and never been robbed except in Miami. People who have been robbed have an identity with that, but the people who have not been robbed also have an identity with that because we don't want to be robbed. And so we want to be safe. But in seeing that the story ended with something that I could actually use and learn a story, being a journalist, it was a very important story for me to know about. So the unique offering, if I can use your words, of shared experiences is that we have a feeling of reaching out to someone else. And when we reach out, we accept. And that acceptance is part of our shared experiences, whether we've actually experienced it or not. The fact that we've reached out, the fact that we have reached back, and the two people come together, listening and sharing, is of, I think, of tremendous importance. And that's why I went into so much of the listening, because when we tell stories, some people tell a lot of stories, some people tell no stories, but everybody has a story. So if we back off sometimes and listen more, we'll hear these stories and we can share more. I hope that helps.
So what do you think is, I mean, I like how this is becoming about listening, like what are, I don't know, some of the best listening strategies that you found being at Rabbit Box, because you've heard so many stories now that there must be things that pop up when you're like, oh yeah, I'm really listening, and what's going on in my mind when I'm listening.
The thing that draws me in more is when somebody actually uses the story spine and the theme to tell the story. Then I'm all over it. I'm there with you. And the fact that the theme can be so varied, we purposely have themes where you can go up and down, or gone but not forgotten, doesn't mean death. It could be the grit closing. It could be leaving home. It could be a 50th high school reunion. It could be, and so anything like that we do. And we encourage first-time storytellers that we will, really put them forth before we do people who told stories before. Because again, it's important for people to get in front of others and share their stories. If we didn't feel it was important, we would not have survived for all these years. We would have not survived the pandemic. God only knows what happened in the pandemic for nonprofits. When everybody had to walk away, everything got tangled. So the fact that Rabbitbox was able to untangle all their problems and maintain the storytelling, and we're at a better place than Foundry, I have to say. We're out at the VFW. It's free parking. Trisha's office is in the kitchen with her food, and she has vegan food and vegetarian food, some Jamaican food, some good Southern food. She has a variety of options. And we have a new floor. They redid the floor of the VFW. We've increased the dimmers so that we have some better lighting in there. We've improved on the sound system. We have good mics, and there is free parking, lots of it.
That was certainly missing at the Foundry.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
And, at the Foundry, there's these waiters and waitresses going down, and so you're trying to listen to a story, and in the VFW, you don't have that. The kitchen is at the back. People can wait there and get their food, but still hear the stories.
And it's a very symbolic space. So, I mean, there's few more impactful stories than the ones that war veterans share, because it's such a specific kind of experience, and it's so specifically human as well, that it's like, wow, taps into many issues, just about existential issues, to be honest. So that's wonderful that that's a location, the location for Rabbitbox now. We do have another question. Harrison asks, as you all engage in personal, vulnerable, and authentic storytelling, do you consider the Rabbitbox storytelling as a place for healing? If so, would you consider healing, or at least in part, an interpersonal experience?
Well, we have to walk a balance. One is, if we get into really serious healing stories, we lose some of our audience, because many of our audience people deal with those serious stories every day. As far as healing, I do think we had a storyteller who talked about being divided or separated from her grandchildren because of a divorce from her son and daughter-in-law. And because she was the grandmother, she was isolated from her grandchildren. And in telling that story, afterwards, there were, and I'm making this number up because I don't remember how many she said, but at least 5 or 6 grandmothers who came up to her and wanted to have a conversation, another conversation, a deeper conversation about what to do when this happens, because they too have had that problem. And so they set up a discussion and a coffee time, and they were hoping to heal from all of this.
Yeah, it seems like it can be a blend of, entertainment and therapy, and like, even just from an academic perspective, like understanding story structure and linguistic. I mean, there's like so many layers of so many elements you could be excited about, you know, in watch, and it's so simple too. It's a story. But I love the idea that, you know, we do you know, heal through sharing, because it seems like, you know, trauma, it's like it feels so special to you because it is your life, but then you understand that it's been done before, you know.
And that's why I read, we've gotten many thank you letters. And that's why I read this specific thank you letter, because she mentioned the fact that it was a safe place. It's a safe place to tell a story that has feelings for you, has emotions for you, has a time when you were full of this story. So to have a safe place where people listen and share stories, I think is very important.
Well, I think we're near the end. If anyone has any final questions, go ahead and type them in the window, or raise your hand. Otherwise, you can always email us at creative@uga.edu, and I can pass anything, we can pass anything on to Lyra. And you know,
Or you can come to Rabbit Box and
or you can come to Rabbit Box,
Ooh.
or maybe you could tell a story at Rabbit Box. I actually have kind of wanted to talk again because it's been almost a decade. So I'm like, oh, that would be
Yay!
really fun to get to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
again. So,
We have the new themes out that we'll announce at the May show
oh,
for the
perfect.
film.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll come to the May show then and see if there's a good fit, and I'll request it. Yeah, it's just such a, like I said, it is just so wonderful, and we are so lucky to have it here. And so thank you, thank you for everything you've accomplished and done for your students and for the university, but also for the community as well. So
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah,
very
it's been
much.
lovely to have you.